Check, check, check. Live stream audio check. Live stream audio check. Live stream video check. That's weird. All right, check, check. Cool. Hey, how's it going? No, it's okay. Yeah, I'm all set. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, it's up. It's up. Yeah, let's see. It's hot. I'm being my own. I'm watching the live stream to like zero in on what I should be looking at. So it's like a 15-second delay.
Hey gang, we'll start in about 5 minutes. Till then, we have food from Julio's over there. Order another drink. We'll get started in about 5 minutes. Thank you for being here.
You can bring it to yeah, you can take it out to the audience. And then I got a mic set up and another chair for like we do have three. Yeah, there's that one. One of the three panelists. Yeah, we can do that. We have Timothy and Karen. You know, they got a structure. So they have a third person use that one. Yeah, and then when the time comes, we can take questions from the audience, or they can just repeat the question before the live stream. Sounds good. Let's do it. Why don't you turn that music down? Welcome everyone to the launch of Liz Kay's brilliant, extraordinary achievement called Monsters, a Love Story, Putnam, 2016. On behalf of the University of Nebraska at Omaha MFA in Writing program, I serve as one of the members of the teaching and residency faculty and as the program development coordinator.
And we're just so pleased and so proud. Our director and founder, Richard Duggan's here. In a couple of minutes, he's going to make some remarks about our program. A few people, first of all, to thank. Naturally, House of Bloom, thank you for having us. One of our alumni, Dave Minnelli, operator of Julio's. Dave, also a gifted fiction writer. Thank you very much. Greg Harry's over here. He has a variety of roles. He's affiliated with the Nebraska Writers Collective. So is Liz. He's doing the live stream for us. So we're able to bring in our alumni from throughout the country and others who are close to our program. Thank you very much, Greg. I mentioned Putnam. I want to thank Putnam and the publicist who's working with Liz Kay, Katie McKee, who helped set this up. Great. And also the Bookworm from right up the street at 90th and Center is selling Liz's book tonight, and Timothy Schaffert's and Karen Shoemaker's books. They'll be joining her in a minute. So thank you, Bookworm. You know, I mentioned the book, and I really encourage you to buy it tonight. And at the end of the night, Liz will sign it. But I know Liz in a variety of ways. I know her as a student, extremely gifted student. I know her as a teacher, a versatile, talented, hardworking teacher who works alongside us at the Seven Doctors Project, and as the editor and publisher of Burnt District, and along with Jen Kay and Spark Wheel Press. A versatile person who we've watched grow and evolve into this debut book that we're all going to hear from tonight. So that's great. And, you know, I really want to encourage you all, and maybe you only know him from Facebook, but behind every brilliant woman is a supportive husband. One of the four leading male characters in this thing called Liz Kay's Facebook. So please buy him a drink tonight, Mr. David Kay. I want to introduce our founder and director, Richard Duggan.
Thank you, Steve. I am here as director of the MFA in Writing program at UNO, and I consider it a real privilege and an honor to have been included as a sponsor of this event tonight that includes our whole family of people in the MFA program. And I am especially, well, in my program, I'm the oldest guy there, all right? So everybody else that I see around me, usually I could say is probably the age of one of my kids. And I kind of feel that way too about the privilege of being here for the inauguration of this fine book. And I'm really proud of our Liz Kay and her accomplishments. So, proud like a father. I've been asked then to make a few words, give a few quick words, which for me is going to be a challenge. But about the MFA program, for those of you who may not be familiar with what this program is about, how it works, and how it marvelously produces the sorts of people that we're facing tonight. It is a low residency program, and I have to define what that means in terms of a regular program for some of you folks. But for one thing, we're kind of proud of the fact that this MFA program in writing is the only one in the state, and only one in the state system. And then as the low residency program, in a public institution, it's one of the very few, and it was the first one in the country that was associated with a public institution as opposed to a private institution, and is still within this state and within the region around us, the only low-res program that exists. Now, what does that mean? A low residency program means that instead of a student who wants to pursue a graduate study of writing, going to a regular master's or MFA program on a campus, having to uproot, go to a campus for 2 years, spend that time there taking a variety of classes and then getting their degree and then packing up again and going somewhere that they hope to call home. The low residency program provides the opportunity for people who are already settled in things that they're doing outside from wherever they come from. And our students come from all over the country, and our faculty come from all over the country. One of the advantages that we have as a low-res program is to attract some really talented writers who come to help our students as mentors and as faculty members of the program, because they too they come in residence for twice a year for 10 days at a time, 2 times a year. They're in residence in Nebraska. And during that time in residencies, this is a time that they use to kind of perfect and reflect rather and absorb the kind of information on their craft and the development, their own personal development as writers, inspired by a plethora of lectures and workshops, readings by faculty that are on the faculty of the program, or by visiting writers, or by alums who come back and will give readings, or by their peers while they're working within the program. So what happens, and what we've discovered in terms of the residency portion of the program, is that every class that comes in at the beginning of a semester, at the beginning of a residency, and our campus, by the way, is, you know, in terms of the residency period and sessions, is not even held on campus. Our campus, UNO, is UNO at essentially the Lead Conference Center in Nebraska City. So it's some pretty nice digs for people to be there for 10 days in that atmosphere. But also, it provides them with a kind of cloistered retreat where they spend the entire time in reflection and working on and coming to grips with what they want to be, who they are as writers, and where they want to take themselves in the process of working with other writers, so that when they graduate, they end up being someone like a Liz Kay, who does a variety of things. You know, so at the residencies, then we go through what I call a kind of hyped up symposium. Our day starts like at 8:30 in the morning, goes to 9 o'clock at night. And then when we're all done at 9 o'clock at night, there is time and plenty of opportunity to continue to socialize with each other. And so what happens, one of the phenomena we discovered about low residency, particularly our kind of low residency, is that people coming in, when they first come in, within a week or so, they have been absorbed by and have absorbed been absorbed into this sort of community of writers. They bond very quickly, and it is a bonding that doesn't just stop when they go back home again for the semester to work on their projects. It's a bonding that continues not only through the 2 years that they're there, but even beyond. It's to the point where we have this, in the 11 years we've been in operation, this widespread network of people who still keep in touch with each other. The program helps by operating a Facebook page for the MFA, and people who are part of it and have been part of the program keep in touch with each other. And so it goes, you know, that's the nature of this community. And you can see tonight there are a number of the local people anyway who've been graduates of this program. They're still very much involved with one another in workshops and support of one another. Then each of the 4 semesters of study, each of the 4 times, the challenge is for the students is to commitment of their work, and that, as it progresses from one semester to another, becomes more and more demanding as they challenge themselves to explore and expand the limits of what they know about writing. and they challenge themselves as well to grow and to expand their own knowledge of their work and of themselves. So that by the time in that concentrated period of 2 years, which seems to go by all too fast for some people, they have come out showing a great deal of progress. So the after the residency, and I'll just wrap this up quickly. During the residency, they are paired with a mentor who will work with them one-on-one for the rest of the semester on a study plan that they developed while they were in residency. And that sends them back to wherever they're from, home, and back to their keyboards and back to their lonely garrets as they try to work out for themselves what it is that they're going to be as writers, where they want to direct themselves. So each of our graduates, as I said, has spent 2 years of intensive exploration of their art and craft as they master their writing skills, and they defined in that time their own unique purpose. And that, to me, is the remarkable results of that process is what we're seeing tonight. Witnessing tonight in this event to celebrate what's happened here. Liz Kay's first novel by a major publishing house. And in doing so, her sort of declaration that she is present now among other talented writers in the theater of American contemporary literature. So congratulations, Liz, and let's go on and celebrate.
Thank you, Richard. I know Liz wants to say a few words before we ask Karen Shoemaker and Timothy Shafford to join us.
Hi, thank you guys so much for coming. So we're live streaming this, right? Am I allowed to swear on a live stream? Because I'm fucking gonna. I mean, I'm going to. So one of the things we're going to be talking about tonight is Nebraska. And it's one of the questions that I got over and over when I took this novel out on submission, and I was talking to people in New York, and they were like, Omaha, what the fuck is in Omaha? Why are you writing about Omaha? And I wish that they could be here tonight and they could see all of you, because holy shit, this is why I write about Nebraska and Omaha. This is why I love this town so much. Look at all of you guys. I have colleagues here and friends here. You guys are friends too, I'm not saying, but I'm seeing people from all of the different facets of my life, and it's just amazing to be able to celebrate this with all of you here tonight. I wish we could turn this live stream around and everyone could see just how many of you have come out. I'm so excited. And it's like 1,000,000 fucking degrees outside too. So thank you so much.
Same as Liz, Timothy, and Karen periodically write about Nebraska. So I want to encourage them to join us, the three of them to join us right now. The question on the table to begin the conversation is, why Nebraska? Before that, we're going to ask each of them to share a brief portion of their work.
I'm gonna sit here.
How does it go? Am I supposed to use it? I can use it.
So we didn't really plan this because we didn't think you guys were gonna show up like this. But I'm gonna ask Timothy and Karen to read a little bit from their novels, or whatever or something else, and then we're gonna chat about what it's like to be writers who write about Nebraska. So, who wants to start?
I do. I want to start. I always like to. Can you hear me back there? Am I like mic'd in some useful way? Nod back there. You can hear me? Thanks, Suvi. Get real close. Okay. I don't know if the question was answered. Can you cuss? But I'm going to cuss because I want to say. I want to say that Liz went to the MFA program where I teach fiction writing. She went through as a poet, but it just speaks to how incredibly talented the faculty is there, because she didn't even work with any of us, and she published this great novel. It was just sort of osmosis, is my theory.
I certainly didn't learn anything from Langan.
But since Liz could leave as this phenomenal poet, she could leave and write this phenomenal book. I decided that tonight, instead of reading from my book, I was going to read from something that Liz published, was The Untidy Season. And I'm going to read poetry, because if she can write fiction, by God, I can write poetry. So I'm going to read a couple of poems, which don't really have anything to do with Nebraska, but we can get back to that. I'm just going to read 2 poems. The first one is Training. Like my mother, I palm cradle the yellow stick of butter like a giant crayon. Press to melt into the crust of fresh baked bread. Time folds in on itself, and on this kitchen, so many miles, oh God, so many miles from home. The egg noodles in the bubbling soup, store-bought. If I close my eyes, I can recall the rhythm of the rolling, thick dough thinning to her nod. But who has time for that now? We will be sated. We will believe this good, this meal I make instead of poems and money. More. Okay, my eyesight just failed. Can I borrow your glasses? More than, really and truly, it did just fail.
I can help you.
Yes,
Yeah,
do.
walk you through.
Yes, walk me through. Tim, read this last line for them, would you?
This
please?
last one?
This last.
Oh, sure. More than once, she told me she wanted never to cook again, but cook she did, till there was no one at her table, not even her own hunger.
Oh, we planned that. I was just going to fake this. Don't try this at home, by the way. The second poem I'm going to read is Hungry. Hungry. We cook over the fire our yearning builds. Start with a massive bundle of hurt by your silence twigs, a long branch from the tree of you don't listen to me, well soaked in the kerosene of hidden tears. We are experts at our craft. Don't stop to admire the crackle of it yet. Here's the log of waiting to be understood, a limb of half-remembered slights. We are just getting started. Here you come now with a truckload of comebacks you've been saving for just this occasion. Soft cottonwood from the I trusted you grove goes in first. Then you stand on the pile and use both hands to throw oaken chunks of you are not my mother, one after another into the flames. I stoke the pyre with the red-hot poker of resentment. Together we build an inferno that scrapes night from the sky. Sparks pop and scatter in brimstone-inspired glee until one catches my skirt. Both of us smolder now. Forced by instinct or habit, you save me. Supper will be late again. Thank you. So, poetry. Fuck you, Liz.
Well, now I'm going to read poetry. No.
No, don't. I was safe reading.
You're done?
I'm done.
I have like 40 minutes. No, I don't. I'm not actually reading from the Swan God novel, which is the book, my most recent book. I thought since Liz wrote this book about someone from Omaha who goes to Hollywood, I would read from my own book about someone from Omaha who goes to Hollywood, except it's set in the early 20th century.
Still, I think we've just become a trend,
I think
right?
so. I think someone hashtag it, please. All right, so I guess I have a few pages from this, from the very beginning of a book called Savoy. At the center of a buffet table was a replica of the Titanic carved from a block of ice. It sat in the Hollywood sunset, poolside, dripping its sweat into a sea of broiled prawns. Cocktail waitresses, wearing nothing but hip-length life vests of canvas and cork, carried toy boats as serving trays, offering hors d'oeuvres of roasted eel. Guests were invited to swim, but the pool was kept frigid. To brave its icy waters, you had to fortify yourself with shots of whiskey. Many did when the sun went down. They dove in naked and they whooped and shrieked. It was 1924, and we were soon to begin production on the song of the Titanic, and so a party. The columnist for Photo Fun magazine asked me, why? Why sink the Titanic, I said. She wisely waited until late in the night to approach me. All the martinis and the backslapping had gone to my head, and I was happy, happier perhaps than ever. Of course, I wouldn't tell her the truth, that the song of the Titanic began as a hook to catch an old lover, and that it worked. It was my Valentine to Birdie, my forbidden love. Instead, I told her the movie was all about me. It's a metaphor that suits me, I said. Like Captain Smith of the Titanic, I've had to navigate through treacherous waters to get where I got. Now I ask you, what kind of knucklehead compares his career to Captain Smith's? But I was convinced that mortality didn't pertain to me anymore. And I was the most famous man in the world. They named dance steps after me: cocktails, candy, cuts of diamonds, bars of soap, gin-scented hair tonic. Young men mimicked the way I wore my tie crooked, and they spent hours in the mirror practicing my careless half smile. There's a little scar on my forehead from my rough and tumble childhood, and they even copied that. A few teen delinquents in Berlin gouged into their own flesh so my scar would mark their heads too. Remember that Hester Klang song that was so popular we all got sick of it? My handsome man has savoir faire, Savoy's scar, and Samson's hair. Everyone wanted me to have everything I ever wanted. Each day felt like a victory. Whole armies of men outlived. With the song of the Titanic, I was certain I would change the course of the doomed ship. The ship would no longer be a metaphor for hazard and catastrophe. I would resurrect the disaster, and Titanic would again mean grand extravagance and spectacle. That Photo Fun columnist, a woman named Delight St. John, would make quite a success for herself from my sinking, and everything went wrong. After everything went wrong, I confined myself to my house by the sea. I refused all invitations. I settled no curiosities. Delight St. John, meanwhile, spent 40 years telling my story as she saw it. She published 3 best-selling unauthorized biographies about me: Savoy, the Manhattan dandy from Omaha, and The Loves and Scandals of Hayes Savoy, and Death on Savoy's Titanic. She wrote the script for a talkie about a scandal-ridden silent film star named Hart Silver. Until I threatened to sue, she billed herself as Hayes Savoy's longtime confidant when giving interviews and lectures. The lawsuit just made her more infamous. She peddled herself then as Hayes Savoy's worst enemy. Even after most of my films had long been lost or turned to smoke, after my silence had been forgotten, she kept me alive as a symbol of excess and indulgence. My downfall caused the downfall of the Roaring Twenties, to hear her tell it. I was the man who ruined it for everyone else. Yet I think the only time we ever spoke was at the side of that pool at that party, and I don't even think we had conversation. All she said to me was, "Why?" And I answered. She never knew anything at all about me. She patched those biographies together from old magazine articles and gossip from strangers. She also relied heavily on a series of books for young men. They were credited to me, but they were ghostwritten by someone I never met. Savoy's Guide to Flapping a Flapper, Savoy's Guide to Nifty Necking, Savoy's Guide to Dressing Snappy and Dancing Happy, Savoy's Guide to Useful Nonsense. But you couldn't talk about her without talking about me. And though I no longer felt like being talked about, I was tickled to squat on so many column inches of her obituary. And her death couldn't have been more apropos if I'd composed it myself. In 1971, at the age of 73, she was traveling alone on a cruise ship. Feeling a little green around the gills, she retired to her cabin for dinner, then privately choked to death on a teensy-weensy fishbone. The poor old gal should have seen that extended metaphor coming from a mile away. If I were to write my own unauthorized biography, I'd structure it after Delight St. John's first book of slander. It suggests in the beginning that by the end, it will offer revelation into my doomed movie, my murdered love, my retreat into reclusiveness. Then the book steps back to begin with my vaudeville career, then on to Hollywood. She wrote it like she was writing a novel, even going so far as to create scenes of dialogue in which I spoke in a kind of gigolo claptrap. I used words like blotto and ducky and piffle. I've been asked perhaps 100 times, when will you tell your own side of things? My answer has always been and will always be never. I don't mean to be impolite. I don't even mean to disappoint. I say never, and I apologize. I nod and put 2 fingers to my head to tip my hat, even if I don't have a hat to tip. But now that I'm in my 80s, never seems certain. Nonetheless, the requests roll in never-endingly. And quite often, I'm offered god-awful gluts of money to rattle all my skeletons, and I don't have to do anything. They say I can just sit there and wheeze and sniffle, and they'll interpret. They'll send a coven of storytellers to catch my last gasps, stenographers, ghostwriters, dramaturgs. I won't have to type an if, and, or but. They'll dot the I's and cross the T's. They'll watch my P's and Q's. Autobiographies, after all, are full of lies. I should know. I've read the old Hollywood tell-alls, and I've foxtrotted my way into every one of them. Not once have I recognized myself. In other people's memoirs, I utter things I never said. I show up in places I've never been, make love to women I've never met, and I father a few fatherless sons. Everyone's so old now, and so many husbands and wives and lovers so long dead, no one knows any modesty. And you're hoping for my immodesty too, an old man's indiscretion, a has-been's last-ditch effort to scandalize. You're dying to ask who killed her, what happened, what aren't you telling us? You want me to solve one of Hollywood's biggest mysteries. Before I die, you want to know the story of my demise. I froze the summer air with blocks of ice. I built elaborate sets and flooded them. I dug a hole deep in the desert floor, rerouted a river to fill it with water, and sank a luxury ship. For years, they all blamed me for the end of everything, as if the song of the Titanic had been so bloated, so ill-fated, so arrogant, it had single-handedly ruined all of silent cinema more effectively than the advent of sound. Since then, most of my movies have been lost, consumed, destroyed. The silver nitrate of the old film combusts, explodes. Once nitrate begins to burn, you can't douse the flame. It breathes its own oxygen. And what films of mine might have survived or sacrificed long ago. For a flick in the 1930s about the Great Chicago Fire, the studio emptied its vaults of all my films, unspooling the reels into the cardboard houses of a movie set. They sent in a cow to kick over a lantern, and in minutes, their makeshift Chicago burned like Atlanta. And with that, every flicker of my every performance was gone in the blink of an eye. That's it.
I love your characters. I kind of like you.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's give him a hand. That's pretty amazing.
Let's not encourage him. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the book. Monsters is a love story, but it's a love story about really, really bad people. So the main character is Stacy. She's a poet. She lives in Omaha. I don't know where I came up with that. It was really a stretch. Like just flash. But Stacy is a recently widowed, and she's sort of drifting. She's a mother, but she's worried that she's not taking care of her kids the best. She's a poet, but she hasn't been writing. So she's just sort of drifting, and she gets an email that someone in Hollywood is interested in adapting her novel in verse, which is a feminist retelling of Frankenstein. It could happen. So this is how Stacy and Tommy are sort of thrown together. Tommy is a very, very A-list actor, and so she has to start sleeping with him almost immediately. It's not like it's a choice. It's just, you know, it just happens. So I'm going to skip ahead because I wanted to read a section of the novel that I think captures a little bit of the sense of Omaha. For me, the novel is in part just a long love letter to Omaha, even though Stacy's a little bit snarky when she describes it. So at this point in the novel, they've reached the point in their relationship when Stacy's going to have to start sleeping with someone else. His name is Philip. He's a doctor. Philip asks me out the following Thursday. It's a doctor's thing, some dinner, and he needs a date. Absolutely, I say when he calls. I'd love to. He picks me up around 5. I've toned the hair down. I've got less shadow on my eyes. I'm wearing a sleeveless sheath that it's still way too cold for, but my arms look really good and my legs are already bare, so what the hell? I've got a warm coat. You look beautiful, he says as I slide into the car. I smile and he backs out of the driveway. It's a nice car, very doctorly, very sturdy, 4 doors, leather interior, heated seats. I sit on my left hip so my knees are pointing toward him, close enough to touch, but it's not a stick shift, and he keeps his hands on the wheel. So where are we headed? I ask, and of course it's a steakhouse, but it doesn't really matter as long as they're serving wine. We walk in, and to start, there's a mixer, and I'm there with all these Midwestern doctors' wives, and I think not a fit. This is not a fucking fit. But whatever, I've lived here a long time. I know how to blend in. Philip orders a scotch and soda, and I say, I'll have a vodka on ice, and I feel like once I drink it, things will be better. Philip has a little stubble coming in, a little 5 o'clock shadow, and I like the way it looks on him. I decide I like the way he looks in general. I shift my body so our arms are just barely touching. He says, I should introduce you to a few people. This time he does rest his hand on the small of my back as he leads me through the room. He's getting better. I can't keep all their names straight, but Janet is the one with the beige Coach purse, and she's married to the guy with the red tie. Alex is an internist, and his wife is pregnant and therefore not drinking. I feel sorry for her. Then there's a couple who are both doctors, and I didn't catch either of their names, but she's an OB and he's an infectious disease guy. Kara is a cardiologist and her husband is named Mark. I don't know what he does, but he is also not a doctor and he seems a little embarrassed about it. And what do you do, Stacy? Asks Alex's pregnant wife. I'm a poet, I say, draining the last of my vodka. I jiggle the glass like the ice might be hiding more. You don't say, says Red Tie Guy. And then he laughs and says, you must get good alimony then. I think about saying, actually, I don't get any alimony because my husband fucking died, just to be an asshole. But Philip says, she does a little screenwriting too. She has a movie coming out. When is it, Stacy? And I just sort of shrug. They're still filming, I say, and I jiggle my glass again and wonder if he's going to notice. Yeah, she was just in LA a few weeks ago on set, and he says on set like he's making air quotes, but he doesn't actually. He keeps his hands down and his left hand is still on my back, which right now is the only thing that's going right. Really, says Kara, that sounds exciting, but she says it like it absolutely does not. Philip notices my glass and says, can I get you another? And I flash him my very best smile. I say, please. So what's the movie called? Mark asks. I don't know, I say. There's been some argument about the title, but the book was called Monsters in the Afterlife. Suddenly, Janet is interested. She says, hey, I think I've heard of that with Tommy DeMarco and Sarah Nixon, I say. Holy crap, that's a big deal, she says. I just shake my head. You know, they had to pay me, so that part of it was pretty nice. Philip returns with my drink and presses it into my hands. He rests his own hand back on the small of my back, and I think, good boy. And I turn and smile at him. Thank you, I say, and I take a sip of my drink. I lean toward his ear. I was really glad when you called. But then Janet says, so have you met Tommy DeMarco? We've been in some meetings, I say. I don't add how he doesn't appear to be speaking to me since I called him a narcissist. They might be fighting a little bit about Tommy's daughter, but mostly about the fact that Stacy has decided to start dating. Philip says, I didn't realize he was involved. I say, and I nod. And Jason Collier. Wow, you really undersold this, he says. He turns toward the rest of them. She just says, I'm working on this little movie thing, I guess. He shakes his head. Jason Collier. Mark says, Collier is a great director, but I've never thought much of DeMarco. He's done some weird stuff. Didn't he do that movie where he's a drug addict who thinks he's killed his girlfriend, but then it turns out that really he didn't? I say, yeah, that's Tommy. But then that seems too familiar, so I add DeMarco, but it feels like I did it too late. He seems like a real playboy, says Red Tie Guy. And I laugh because who says that? And I say, that's putting it nicely. And Janet says, really? In this really engaged tone. And everyone is looking at me a little more intently. And I feel like I've just turned into a walking tabloid. I mean, he has a pretty bad reputation, I say. And then I shut my mouth and focus on the vodka. Philip pulls into my driveway and stops the car. If the kids weren't home, I'd ask you in. That's okay, he says. He turns in his seat to face me. Can I kiss you goodnight? I'd be mad if you didn't. He leans toward me, holds my neck with his left hand, and he parts his lips this time. I am marginally impressed. I put my hand on top of his thigh and press my thumb across it, and I feel him shift in his seat. His mouth moves with a little more assurance, a little more need. I twist my chin to the left to free up my lips, and I trace the stubble along his jaw with the tips of my fingers. I like this on you, I say, a little rough against my chin. He says, I like you, and he turns his mouth to find mine again, and this time he uses his tongue to tease open my lips. I think, of course you do. I think, who wouldn't? Crunchy or creamy, I say, holding the pantry door open. Creamy, Stevie says. Ben's having scrambled eggs for breakfast, but Stevie wants peanut butter toast. I set the jar on the counter in front of him and walk back to the stove. Do you have a boyfriend now? Stevie says. I turn to look at him, but he's focused on spreading the peanut butter. You mean because I went to dinner last night? And 2 other times, too. You're right, we did go 2 other times. So I guess I have a friend I sometimes go to dinner with. Is that why you're not talking to Tommy anymore? I turn back to the stove. Ben's eggs look a little dry. I slide them onto a plate. I'm so stupid. Of course they would have noticed. We talk all the time, and sometimes my hands will be full and my phone will start ringing and one of them will pick it up for me. Stevie always hands it right over, but Ben will talk for a minute or two. I'm not talking to Tommy, I say. He's just been really busy with the movie. It doesn't have anything to do with me having dinner. I set the plate of eggs in Ben's place. Can you go tell your brother his breakfast is ready? Okay, he says, and he hops off the stool and heads down the hallway. I turn toward the sink, run cold water into the pan. Mom, Stevie says, so I know he's back. I really like Tommy. I shut the water off, but I don't turn around. I say, I know, baby, I really like him too. I don't hear from Tommy for 3 weeks, and when I do, I wake up to see a text from him that reads, I forgive you. I pick up the phone and type, go fuck yourself, and then hit send. I'm in line at the post office when he calls. I'm shipping a box of books. I see his number come up and I hit answer and hold the phone to my ear. He must realize I've picked up because after a second he says, Stacy? I scuff my foot along the floor. I shift the box of books onto my hip. Okay, he says, you were right. How's Sadie? I say, but I make sure my tone stays pouty. I don't want him to think that I'm not still pissed. Better, maybe, I don't know. He sighs. You were right. I'm a terrible father. I didn't say you were a terrible father. I said you were a narcissist. Same thing. I'm almost to the front of the line. I say, I should go. It's not a good time. Come on, Stacy, what are you doing? He says. I'm mailing a package, I say, and I shift its weight to keep from dropping it. You know, he says, sometimes people argue, and then if they aren't complete assholes, they figure out a way to patch shit up. So, you know, stop being a complete asshole. I set my package on the counter and try to smile at the woman behind it. I'm trying not to let anything slip. I shift the phone a little away from my mouth and say, I need to send this to Minneapolis, media rate. On the other end of the line, Tommy says, oh, fuck you, and hangs up. When I walk out to the car, I don't get in. I lean against the truck and let the sun warm my face. We're having one of those early springs when it's already warming up in March. I have always loved spring in Nebraska. When Michael wanted to talk me into moving here, he brought me out in the spring and the whole city was so green and the trees were budding and Michael and I were starting a new life and I said, yes, let's do it here. And so we did. And even here in the post office parking lot, it feels like the air is filled with possibility. It feels like the very beginning. I take my phone out and I call Tommy, and when he answers, I say I'm lousy at apologies, and he says, you suck at forgiveness too. I know, I say, but you're good at it, right? I am, he says. I'm like fucking magnanimous. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I invited Tim and Karen here to talk to me about why we write about Nebraska. Why do we write about Nebraska?
Actually, you sent a memo around saying, come to make me look good. Timothy didn't get that memo, so I didn't come prepared to talk about Nebraska.
You didn't come prepared? What are we, a bunch of writers?
Why Nebraska?
Why Nebraska?
Do you want to go first, Timothy?
Sure. I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't think you were supposed to write about Nebraska. You know, like I felt like there's like the one sort of black hole in the center of the country that could not be written about, or that nobody would have any interest in. But then, like when I was in high school, I read, is it called The Lost Lady, the Willa Cather novel? There's a Harold Robbins novel called The Lost. There's The Lonely Lady, and I always want to call Willa Cather's The Lonely Lady, by Harold Robbins. And Pia Zadora.
Cather novel.
So they made a movie with Pia Zadora. But A Lost Lady, and she mentions the town I grew up in that novel. And it was kind of a profound thing, you know, like to read that and think, oh, I know these places, I know that river, I know this space. And so then I kind of came to realize that that's what people wanted from me, you know, that I was writing about other places, a lot of places I had not been. But there was a lot of encouragement, not from the banal sort of write what you know kind of advice, but just from, you know, that there was something about that experience that I could bring to the page in a way that was unique. So I found that in publishing, people really want to see that from me and not other things.
Well, if you guys don't know, Karen's novel, The Meaning of Names, is it this year's selection for One Book, One Nebraska? So it's...
So I do write about Nebraska. I actually didn't start out writing about Nebraska. I started out writing about people. My short stories were very character driven. I have a short story collection called Night Sounds and Other Stories. And they were set in Nebraska, but they weren't, place didn't really have a really strong place in the narrative. And I've written a couple of other novels that have not been published, but the current one, The Meaning of Names, it, I actually didn't want to write it because it's set in 1918 in Nebraska. And apparently Cather has written about this period of Nebraska, so it's kind of been covered. And I love Cather. I'm a big Cather fan. I've read her, you know, I've read all her books. And so I love Cather, but I did not want to sort of throw my meager abilities up against that genius wall. So I wanted to avoid writing it. But the story takes place in Nebraska. It's about Nebraska people. And it was a story that really meant a lot to me. It's the story, the seed for the novel is the story of my mother's birth during the flu pandemic of 1918. And so I started writing about that, and from that built into Nebraska. So Nebraska kind of chose me rather than I chose Nebraska. And I tend to just like more subtle things. I tend to foreground things that are in the background more, and that seems suitable to Nebraska's landscape. It's a very subtle landscape. It takes them. It's not something like Colorado or the wilder states. It has much more subtle beauty, and I spend time looking at it. It sort of unfolds for me. So I just love the way Nebraska looks, and I like the people here. So. They're nice.
Fishing for applause.
You guys are so nice. Thank you. And these glasses are so nice. Thank you.
It's the good life, yeah.
It's the good life.
Well, I write about Nebraska, I think, because Nebraska is the place that I've lived the longest. Was an Army brat as a kid, so Nebraska is the place that feels the realest to me, and I liked Nebraska as a juxtaposition to the sort of glamorous escape of Hollywood that Tommy is offering Stacy, and Nebraska felt like the perfect counterpoint for that. And also I just love this town. I just love it. And I loved being able to mention places. I did not realize when I was writing the book that it turns out I'm also a historical novelist, because my book takes place when we still had M's.
You still had what? Oh,
M's. Yeah. Yeah, there was like a little moan. Everyone was like, oh. Yeah. So
yeah, in one of my short stories, I described something on UNL campus, and that was the most commented on thing in the entire book by men for a long time, that I could follow where your characters were walking. And I think there's something to that there's not a lot of novels written by Nebraskans about Nebraska, really. And so Nebraskans embrace it, novels that reflect them in some way. So having written a Nebraska novel, I'm more inclined to want to write Nebraska novels because I like the way people respond to it. And because it's a Nebraska novel, they tell me a lot more stories. So I'm like loaded with more stories about Nebraska. So.
In a creative writing class a year or so ago, I signed Rainbow Rowell's Fangirl, which is set, it's set in a creative writing classroom on UNL's campus, and they liked it, and we got a lot to talk about it, but they were irritated that like she'd moved Valentino's a block or something like that. Like I can't remember. There were a few inaccuracies that incensed them, and I'm not even sure that they were true, that they were right, but they just chose to take that. Or like at some point they're like, well, she's in front of the library, she can't get in that,
that door is always locked.
I gave a reading in Atkinson, Nebraska, which is just 20 or 12 miles from where the novel takes place. And there were like 90 people in the middle of the afternoon in a town of 150, I think. So it was really intimidating because they were the relatives of the people in the novel. And so I was nervous about going there because they knew people would know what was true and what wasn't. And the biggest complaint was, you put that farm way too close to town. The river doesn't run through right there. And so it's funny that we know our landscape. So
I don't name the names of the towns. Well, I guess Omaha, I do name it, but I don't think you could really do a walking tour based on anything I've written. I do tend to move things around. I don't care.
Can I make a plug on something?
Of course.
Humanities Nebraska has an app, and you can tour Nebraska with, they have 10 authors. You can go to like Cather sites and Clefcorn sites of things that he's written about. And they've just got one for One Book, One Nebraska. And so you can tour the sites of the meaning of names and go across Nebraska on going to the different sites, the train depots and the churches and the like.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Have you taken the tour?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I have oddly enough taken the tour. So.
That's great. Yeah. Steve, were you gonna
Say this?
Bring me a drink.
Sure, yeah.
From Sparkville Trust, Jen Lander is going to help us. If anyone has any questions, raise your hand and we will move this microphone.
Jen is amazing at walking, but not across streets.
That's such a lie.
You're not chewing gum, are you?
Thanks a lot. I'll be doing this for feedback tomorrow.
Yeah, it does have to say plugged in, but I've got like 20 feet of cable. So. That's about
the questions are. If anyone has any questions for these guys, I will come and give you the mic. So,
Yes.
questions? Who has them?
I want you guys to know that we know your first names. 90% of you, we know your first names. So speak up or we will be calling on you.
Who has a question?
Wow.
All right.
I'm gonna think of something. All right, Liz.
Uh-oh.
What? Like, how did you start the process of writing this novel?
How did I start the process of writing the novel?
Like, how did you, like, what was the kernel? Like, how did you get going?
I actually, some of you know that I am, all of you know this, everybody in here knows me. I'm a poet, and I had just written, I just come to the end of writing a novel in verse that's a retelling of Hansel and Gretel from the perspective of the witch. And there was something about those poems that were really interesting to other writers and artists, and they wanted to respond to it and do things with it and draw pictures, or people sent me poems that they had written in response. And the poems were part of a Page Meets Stage production out of Eastern Washington University. And initially it was really uncomfortable for me to have other people get their hands on my work. Even having someone read the poem out loud it felt awkward. You know, they wouldn't get the inflection quite right. Yeah, it was my poem and they were reading it and I was like, oh, that's not the rhythm I would use. And so it felt very uncomfortable. And I started thinking about what that would be like to experience that on a large scale with this Hollywood movie and this very commercial sort of production, and what that would be like for someone who's kind of a control freak. Stacy is totally a control freak. And Todd Robinson, are you leaving? You son of a bitch. You haven't even hugged me. You come up here and hug me.
That's just a warning to all of you out there.
I'm not going anywhere.
All right. Just try to leave.
Yes.
We've locked the
Be
doors.
nice to him. It's his birthday.
I can't miss out on a hug from Todd. So I'm sorry, what was I saying? Yeah. So I was thinking about that idea of the loss of control of one's art. And so I really thought that I was going to be more interested in the adaptation. And then once I started writing it, Tommy and Stacy just really took over.
I have a question, Liz.
Yes?
Did you spend time in Hollywood, or did you talk to Hollywood people, or did you just pull it out of your ass?
I just pulled it right out of my ass, like everything else. No, I really didn't. I spent a lot of time reading like sort of industry stuff. I just read everything I could find. A lot of blogs and all sorts of just general crap. And then I made it up. Yeah.
But did you go to LA? Have you been
No.
No.
Not during this. No.
See, I didn't either. I went for AWP.
I went for AWP and I was like, I wrote about this airport. I did not get it right.
I got everything right. Like somehow magically, like, picture. I guess because like I faked it enough.
Uh-huh.
You can avoid research.
Yes. I'm very lazy. So yeah, I did the minimum.
Well, it's good to rely on your imagination and just let it, rather than trying to restrict it.
Right.
Parameters and such. Like, restrict it to reality.
Right.
Okay, we have another question. Is it on?
No.
We'll just pretend. Okay, there it is.
When you're writing your book, do you get there from the end, or do you take an idea and just develop it? Do you start with at the end of the book, so to speak? This is what I really want to end up at, and then kind of crescendo into the end, or do you just start with an idea and just let it grow?
For me, I was in denial that I was writing a novel until I hit about 80,000 words, which is just about the full length of a novel. So I didn't have a plan. I didn't have an outline. I had a real sense of where the characters were going to end up, but no, I didn't have any plan at all. Do you?
I had about 300 plans and kept revising the novel. And when I knew the core story, I knew there was a baby going to be born to a flu-stricken mother, so that was pretty simple. And what I ultimately did was the novel is structured around her pregnancy. There's sex in the novel, and it starts with sex because she's going to be there's a baby born at the end, so it makes sense.
Dirty
it really
book.
makes sense that you would structure a novel where a baby's being born on pregnancy, but it was like 30 drafts before I figured out that was a thing you would do, that's how I would structure it to start. But I was so fixated on that story that I knew that I kept putting it at the beginning, and then everything was flashback. So once I figured out that I had to start with the conception really then and move forward, then I realized what the novel was really about, which isn't the birth. It's about the community and the war, the effect of World War I on Nebraska, et cetera. So when I restructured it, I learned something about what the novel was really about. And so I learned a lot about what I was writing about, but I took it a lot slower than Liz did. I mean, it took me 7 or 8 years to write the novel, so don't do that at home either.
Should have been in more sex.
I should have. I
Yeah.
should have. This.
Yeah, sometimes I know how I want it to end up, but it never starts at the end. John Irving says that he knows the first sentence and the last sentence of every book that he starts, but the middle changes, but the first and last always stays the same, which I can't conceive of how that would work. But yeah, I mean, it usually kind of, sometimes I start with some strong sense of everything that's going to happen, and then that all changes as I'm writing along, and you get to know the characters, and you find something more interesting that can happen, or you learn something, especially when you're writing historically, you learn something about the past that you want to, that you think could be a pivotal detail, and so yeah.
You have 5 novels?
Yes. This is the, yeah, well, the one I read is the 6th. Yeah.
So he's the expert.
Yeah, that's me.
We have another question. You don't know this woman.
Hi, guys. I love that Steve asked us to all give David a round of applause. So kind of in that spirit, I'm wondering for each of you what your 3 essential ingredients are for sustaining your writing life. Like psychologically, spiritually, literally, whatever, but the 3 essential.
I really just have one, and it is David. David keeps my life. I'm not being sweet. No. No. David keeps my life going. He makes sure that he makes sure I take my fucking vitamins every morning. It's insane. I didn't take my vitamins this morning, by the way. But he does. He keeps things going. He makes sure that the kids get to school. So all of those things that I could very easily forget because when I'm working, I don't really come up for air, and he lets me do that. So that's it.
But you were telling me that I was doing that for you.
Well, I mean, Tommy is based on you. He's very hot.
Jimmy, Tommy, I care.
That's a tough question about 3 essential. I don't know if I can get that far. Actually, I just have all these voices in my head, And I think I write to keep from going crazy as best I can. And I don't know that I've really been successful at that. But so I think that the impetus for writing would be that I fear I'm going to die before I get those voices put down. So I need to write faster. You think it'd make me write faster, but it doesn't. But I need a lot of, I'm sorry to each of my students out there who I said, you cannot wait for the muse to arrive or any of that, all that bullshit I told you. I personally need a lot of space around me, a lot of silence around me. So I get my best writing done when I'm on a retreat, and they're do-it-yourself kind of retreats. I'll go to St. Benedict's and a monastery or rent a cabin somewhere because I'm very embroiled in my life. I have a big family, and our house is kind of family central. So I don't get a lot done at home. I really need space. So I leave. And so space and fear of death, that's two. I'll work on the other one.
3 things. Gin at noon, gin at 5, and gin around 9. No, I'm not serious. I guess, well, I mean, along the lines, I mean, Karen didn't mention her husband, but I'm sure he's the third thing. But my partner, like, I mean, I always joke because Joan Accacello was in town a couple of years ago and was talking about writers, and she was talking about the literary wife, you know, the tradition of the literary wife. So I always call him my literary wife. And but he does, like, I ask him questions and he has answers, or at least he gives me answers. He seems to know a lot of things, and I've gone through life not knowing anything. Like I never picked up anything. I'm not sure, like like my shoes have no strings on them just because I can't tie them. But yeah, so that kind of support. I also pace. I guess I pace, so I'm grateful for my legs. I fear death too. I'm dying right now.
How much gin have you had tonight?
Tonight or today?
David can teach you how to tie your shoes. He taught all our kids.
You didn't teach any of them?
No, I don't do anything. No.
Well, so is Stacy you? Like, is that like? I mean, except your
Stacy
husband's
is
alive.
confident. Yeah, and her husband, my husband is still alive. I mean, for now, I would be so lost. No, Stacy isn't really me. I did rob from my life pretty liberally, from my surroundings, my neighborhood. Not my neighbors. Michelle, if you're here, you're not in the book. But I did really, rob from my experience living in Omaha with kids. So Stacy's kids aren't my kids, but I live with little boys, and I understand the sort of patterns and movements and speech patterns of little boys, and so all of that definitely informed the book. And Stacy definitely has all of my anxieties writ large. So yeah, all the things that I worry about. Am I a good enough mother? No, definitely not. That definitely informs Stacy in some way.
Well, you could make a novel just out of like your Facebook post. Like that's a novel I would read. It's so hilarious.
I'm going to, yeah. I need an idea, so there you go.
Done.
Yeah.
Well, Jen's making me do it.
No?
I can. So
Is this really Jen's question?
no, it's mine. It's mine. So every time I've heard you talk about the book, you talk about how horrible how bad the people are that are the characters in your novel. But that's not true. They're not that bad of people, I don't think. I mean, I think they're just people.
Uh-huh.
And then you just talked a little bit about how you're like Stacy, right? Right?
I'm nicer than Stacy.
Okay,
Yeah, no,
but-
definitely
well,
Stacy has some of my
Okay, so
anxieties. Yeah.
so as a writer, what is your relationship with the characters that you write? And
Oh,
all
I
three
love
of you,
them.
all three of you can
Oh.
answer that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think Stacy and Tommy, especially Tommy, they're pretty bad people. They're not nice to each other. They aren't. I wouldn't want to be in a relationship with either one of them. Of course, I wouldn't want to be in a relationship with me. I'm sorry, David. I think it's probably pretty bad. But I don't think they're nice. I do think they're trying in their own ways. I think they're pretty human. They're flawed. But no, I absolutely adore them. I love them. Yeah.
What did your editor like? What notes did you get from your editor, like from the raw material of the what you submitted?
17 pages, single spaced.
Seriously?
Yeah.
And so, like, what kinds of things did emerged from that process?
You know, one of the primary concerns was really just pacing. So it was kind of cutting, especially in the beginning stages of the novel. As I mentioned, Stacy sort of starts the novel sort of drifting, and I think I let that go on a little bit too long. So we cut some pages from the beginning, and then I had to tone down a little bit.
It was dirtier.
I had to take out some of the profanity.
Really?
My agent actually asked me to take out. She said the last note she gave me was, "And I need you to take out a third of the fucks." And I said, "I've already cut like 80% of them."
Have they not seen The Sopranos?
No. So I took out a little bit, and then we had to sort of tone down a little bit of Stacy's internal snark. It was a little heavy, so yeah, touched that up a little.
So the book is now shorter than it was originally, or did it end up being kind of the same?
No, it's shorter. I cut probably 5,000 words with my agent, and then I cut probably another 3,000 with my editor.
And how many thousand were those?
9,000 of them. No, I don't know. I think that's more than I just said we cut. No, yeah. Math is not good. Yeah.
And you said your agent sort of intervened on some of the profanity and such, right?
Yes.
So before
it even went to editors. Yeah. Yep. So, all right.
Thank you all for being here. Is the bookworm ready? Yes? All right, here we go. These authors are going to sign their books for us on behalf of the UNO MFA and Writing Program. Thank you for being here. Contact us if you have any questions, interest in our program. Come visit us in July. We really want to show you our program that we're so proud of. Timothy, Karen, Liz, Kay, thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.